All right. Well, welcome everybody. I am Jeffrey Richardson, Product Marketing Director here at Kochava, and we are really excited to welcome you to this webinar on generative AI and its explosive potential in Adtech. So welcome. Before we introduce our speakers, I do want to get kicked off with a few quick announcements before we begin. So let me go ahead and select a screen here and we'll jump into a few of those. Awesome. So first off, this webinar will be recorded, so you don't have to worry about trying to take a bunch of notes or try to screenshot things. We also do love your questions, so submit your questions in the Q&A function. We will have a chat moderator as well, and you can send your questions through there. And Leslie Amadio from our team, who's on the backstage there, will be able to push those over to me. But if you can put them in the Q&A, that allows me to see them more easily and insert them into the discussion. And then finally, we have an hour. Generative AI is a huge topic, and we certainly won't be able to capture all questions, all discussion points in this 60-minute time frame. But follow us online on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Get in touch and continue the discussion after that. So with that, I do want to go ahead and I'm going to bring our speakers onto stage at this point so that we can go ahead and walk through introductions. So let me go ahead and move them all up here and we will let them say hello and introduce themselves. So Ethan, Mike, Hamilton, and Katie, welcome aboard here. And let's go ahead and go from left to right on the slide. So Mike, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself first.
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Mike Brooks, and I'm going to be talking from three major points of view today throughout my career. The first stop I'll talk about is at AOL when I was an analyst and a growth advisor, working closely with the DSP and AOL 15 years ago via acquisition of advertising.com was one of the first companies to deploy machine learning in a web-based environment for media buying. So we'll talk a lot about that. Secondly, I then went to be the CRO and head of marketing at an app called WeatherBug. So when it comes to applications of this in the user acquisition world, but also its impact on monetization, those are things I experienced a little bit as a publisher and have since worked with folks to evolve. The final component was my last stop where I was the COO at an ad tech company called the Verve Group, where I managed our supply side P&Ls of Smato, PubNative, Verve, and Liquid Connected TV. So those are the three major experiences I'll be drawing from as we talk today. And I will share my fun fact, which is I have had the extreme honor of speaking at a Kochava summit, working at 3 different companies. And I think I've been to Sandpoint maybe 9 times. So they didn't tell me to say that, but that is a shameless plug. If you get a chance to check it out, it looks exactly like my background. I've been able to be a part of this crew for a long time. So thanks for having me, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. We were excited to have you here too. Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks. Hamilton Radcliffe. I am the GM of Search Ads Maven, one of the products here at Kochava. I've been at Kochava for a year and a half. I cut my teeth at Adtech at a company called Datalogics. It was a small company back in 2014, but it put a big dent, I think, on the ad tech world. It was taking massive amounts of data around interactions with customers and created some of the most powerful audiences in the world. I then moved into a role at Oracle in Oracle advertising after the acquisition and was there for 8 years prior to Kochava. Taking on the role of GM at Search Ads Maven, this is a product that helps you get the most out of your Apple Search Ads spend. It's an incredibly powerful platform for you to be able to advertise your app and drive the expansion and growth and goals that you want out of that product. And we're here to help. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. Mike, great to have you on the board. I'm looking forward to hearing the things that come out of this conversation. Thanks so much. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Katie.
I'm Katie Darren, and I have been at Kochava for about 6 years now. I manage all of our strategic client relationships on the founder side of the business, which is more of a consulting realm. Previously, before this, I've been on the marketing side for companies like Tommy Bahama and Eddie Bauer, the Smithsonian, kind of working as a marketing manager there. And a fun fact with ChatGPT for me is I have 3 boys and we're trying to figure out family meals, all of that. So we've been using it for meal planning, and that's been pretty interesting. Just trying to say, hey, what do you want to plan for the week? Here's my ingredients, and then you get a whole list of meals. So that's fun.
That's pretty cool. I didn't tell you to eat Soylent Green or something like that from.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then Ethan.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Ethan Lewis. I'm the CTO of Kochava. I've been at the company for little over 7.5 years now. So I have been lucky enough to more or less see every corner of the company, and it's been a lot of fun and watching it evolve. So super excited to talk about AI today. Mike, thrilled to have you on. I think I've been at a lot of your panel conversations, and I have to admit I was a little bit of a fanboy wanting to have you on this panel to join. Love the conversation that you bring, and thrilled to have you on the panel with us today.
Oh, stop it, you. Thanks for having me. Really excited for it.
Yep. And then from the AI fun fact for me, I think as a technologist, there's just so much learning to be done with AI, and figuring out where we can apply it to our product stack, figuring out how we can leverage it for future products. I am a learner and a user of the tool, and it is slowly taking over my day-to-day workflow. So if you can imagine what I do, AI is in just about all of it, which is pretty fun.
Yeah. No, thank you. All right. Well, no, it's a pleasure to have you all here. And I guess fun fact for me, I was just looking at the date, and actually in 7 days exactly, I will be 7 years with Kochava. So 7 there. Well, let's dive in, and I want to start by really setting the stage, if you will, to what is AI, because I think the topic AI, the name, the term, you say that, and to different people that might mean a whole bunch of different things, right? There's a whole big catalyst right now with this rush of new interest, but AI is not new, and so Ethan, I'm going to lean heavily on you here.
Sure.
To really touch on what is AI, and I'll let you take it from here, and I'll kind of run through the slides as you speak through some things. And I have a question that came in from registration that I'd love to throw in the mix here in a moment as well.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah. So, I think a lot of us are asking the question, what is AI? And, being a pretty big movie buff myself, my head directly goes to the Terminator and Skynet and taking over the world. And luckily for us, that's not quite where AI is, at least not yet. So there's a lot of definitions around what AI is. There's a lot of debate on how broad the term goes, but one of the definitions that I really like is training a computer system to perform a specific task that specifically mimics human behavior through various technologies. So it's a multidiscipline field. It leverages mathematics, computer science, and cognitive science. So again, specifically, the big thing to call out is mimic human behavior. So whether or not you're thinking of fields like computer vision, natural language processing, those are all tools and techniques that the AI has been trained on to perform various tasks.
Yeah. And if we think about, like, I always think of like Siri, Alexa. I remember back when Siri was very new and just, wow, oh my gosh. But can we talk about narrow AI versus
Sure.
artificial general intelligence and the difference between those two?
Yeah. I always struggle with the term narrow AI because I feel like it has a little bit of a negative connotation. The other term for it is just as bad. It's weak AI. So the gist though is there's really two different paradigms that we're looking at when we're talking about artificial intelligence. The first is really what we're in right now, which is a branch or an extension of machine learning and deep learning that is training specific models to again do very specific one-off tasks. These tasks are truthfully pretty amazing. I think all of us have seen the power of especially generative AI over the last several weeks, but again, it boils down to under the hood, they're designed to do specific tasks and mimic certain behaviors. On the flip side, you have artificial general intelligence, which is really more the natural progression to be able to self-learn and explore new concepts and grow as a system of compute versus just being trained specifically. So it's very theoretical. There's some people that say, we could be within 5 years of AGI. I myself am a little bit more skeptical on the timeline, but certainly that's where the future of artificial intelligence is going. Beyond AGI is a term that you might hear, which is called super intelligence. And that's more or less where we predict AI will be even smarter than humans in what they're doing, and that's in the very, I think, distant future. Yeah. So I think this table really highlights a lot of them. We won't go through each of these, but the definition, again, designed to do a specific task, whereas on AGI you have the ability to do more complicated tasks, any tasks, ad hoc tasks. You can think of it way more human in nature on how it can go about thinking through its tasking. I mean, then the areas that I think really start to showcase are around creativity and autonomy. So having problems to be able to go research a topic on its own and come back with specific answers based off of unknown data sets that it wasn't trained on. That's not something that narrow AI can do, but AGI could.
That's fascinating. And as we jump to this next slide, which is kind of almost a Lumascape style grid here, I do want to throw this one question out that we had during registration, which, can you explain large language models and how they actually work? Obviously, we don't want to get stuck there because that might take an hour in and of itself. And then they asked for maybe a real life example would be helpful. They said, it seems like the industry is attempting to be very secretive about how these work under the hood. And this person would love to know if it's hot smoke, and they put Web3 anyone ? Or actually like valuable. So maybe that's something you can speak to as you unpack this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, just before we dive in too deep, I think it is a little bit hand wavy in the space with LLMs. And in fact, one thing that I found really interesting early on when we started leveraging them is they're typically called black box models, meaning you really don't know what is happening internally. And that's a mixture between some of the complexity that goes into training these versus what we can observe as the outputs. So, most LLMs are trained on billions and billions of parameters that go into forming the overall model. And that adds into a very high level of complexity when we go through and actually try to predict what the output is going to be on the outside. So that might be a little bit of a non-answer, but keep that in mind as you're thinking through how you integrate LLMs, how you can leverage them, and how you can go about predicting them. So
Ethan, I'm sorry to interrupt. Please go on.
Ahead. No, go for it.
No, I was going to say one thing I would add, and I'm generally a cynic when it comes to everything black box. I have generally been impressed in conversations, and today I'll talk mostly about media buying with the applications here. What really scares me from a hand-wavy perspective is applications within privacy. So we'll talk more about it, but as we're talking about like what is the scary part of this, to me in evaluation, it's not as much the hand-wavy black box of the stuff we were worried about 10 years ago. It's the hand-wavy about the next 12 months that has me most trepidatious in these conversations. Just to share.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great call out. And the gist of it is there's a lot of bias that can go into LLMs. So it's all dependent on the training data that goes into to create the specific models. That can include PII data, that can include malinformation. The options for nefarious outputs due to how the models are trained are pretty high. So definitely a good call out. But just taking a step back on what an LLM really is, one thing that I think is crucial to keep in mind with a lot of machine learning algorithms and models is it's largely just a prediction. So an LLM is specifically just working to predict the next word in its content output. So that might seem like a too easy of a scenario, but that's really the power of what they're doing. They're getting input, they're generating a word, they're adding that back in to understand what the next prediction word should be. And all of that is based off of the training data that goes in to build the model on how accurate they can be on prediction of that next word. So that's why very early on you saw things like ChatGPT is terrible at math. It's not super easy to predict just based on formulas per se what the next output is. And over time, more training data sets are going in. And it's not that the AI can compute math, it's just better at predicting what the final answer is going to be. So really, really interesting work on how LLMs work. And I think we'll continue to see how we can further fine tune those specific models to fit in with specific use cases in the market. And then the last call out I would make is the call out similar to Web3. And I think that there is a lot of smoke and mirrors on a lot of AI applications that are out. Trepidation going into what they can do, how they work, how they are predictable, how they're privacy safe. To Mike's point, that those are all things that we have to take into account. Very similar to the hype around Web3. There's a sliver of really solid Web3 technologies that are driving that space. The same can be said about AI.
That's really helpful. And I actually want to launch a poll here as we jump into our next discussion point here. So I'm going to prop this up on the screen here, but we'd love to know how you feel about AI, if you're excited about it, if you're neutral about it, if you're scared about it. I think there's a mix of feelings out there, and we can leave this open for a while. I'm just sharing the results right now live as they come in here for a moment, but it seems like we're trending upward toward the excited. So any I guess as we think about AI as we've known it today, Katie, I know, just thinking about how AI has manifested within Kochava traditionally, with machine learning and modeling. Can you speak to a couple of the applications and how those have impacted the customers that you work with from a client analytics perspective with Kochava Foundry?
Yeah, so one model that we use quite a bit and clients have used quite a bit is our predictive churn model. So that model essentially looks at data that comes in within the first 7 days of when an install happens and uses that data to predict the likelihood of a device to continue to have activity in their app in the next 30 days. So that can be very helpful for clients to get a kind of a look at the data, at day 7 versus having to wait till post-install event activity. So then they can start making optimization decisions, more just efficiencies in their scale, changing things around in their creatives, because that's at a device level. But then you can use that to look at campaign, creative, by a network, all different ways. So that has been really useful because those scores can also then be posted back to your networks or internally or anything like that. So that has been really helpful. I also think lookalike modeling and audiences are really helpful with AI. So you could find a certain, customer segment that you find, has been very valuable, has a lot of LTV, and then you could send those devices and then use that to create a model of a larger scale that could also be, very valuable, but more of just like how do I customize it so then I can use that to target and segment. And that's been really helpful as well.
Yeah. And I think of fraud prevention too, historically, I know has relied heavily on machine learning and pattern recognition and anomaly detection, if you will. And so any other thoughts on that, I guess, Mike, from your experience in the industry too, in terms of the ways across the last, 15 plus years that you've seen AI manifest pre this generative AI kind of exponential explosion?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, kind of taking a deeper dive on the media buying side, you can look back historically at companies like advertising.com as part of AOL as far as 12 years ago, was using machine learning to devalue impressions that converted poorly. And even, if you were to Google, which I did, the Media Math Brain description on YouTube, one of the OG display applications of what we called AI back then, with left brain and right brain components of the algorithm, that was launched 9 years ago. So when we talk about the exposure within the digital and programmatic ecosystem, I think we kind of went through this period where it was real and we really cared about it. And then, to people's point earlier, there was so much hand waving that it became this black box eye roll. And now we're kind of re-entering this world where it's leaving the world of the eye roll and it has more substance. And now we see it, applied over, even just like the last 2 years or last year. You look at companies in the third party space like an AppLovin or a Moloko, folks that have invested a ton, both publicly and infrastructurally, on being heavily focused on machine learning and AI and having that drive media buying. Like, those are big players in our space that are using this as their main mast. And then you have folks in social like TikTok using it to generate creatives that are predictably going to convert the best before you run the media. We have Amazon Unboxed this week, where they're announcing more applications of AI in the DSP. So it's cool because it's always been here, and we're at this like point two, the second step here. But it's really going to be interesting how this evolves the next couple of years, especially when it comes to third parties using it to navigate the third party space versus first parties using it to navigate their own stuff.
Mike, do you think that the shift is really around the fact that the people that are benefiting most from the AI are the ones that are engaging directly with it? Whereas before, older examples of models, you're going to have some data science team that is doing this in some aspect for you, and you're going to get some hand wave, an output number, and told to trust that that's right.
That is how it was. I would say it still remains to be seen if that's not how it is today. So I hear you 100%. Back then, there was no depth. There was just like the front UI, and it's like, this is UI, versus now, everybody has 3 depths of pages on their website explaining how it works and how theirs works. So it has definitely been accessible, but I think it's also the technology and the learning component, not just doing that original equation, but having it learn and continue on, is more capable now than it was back then. So it's this new generation of it being real and not hand wavy is what I would say.
Yeah. And there's actually, I think, an interesting question from a registrant that might fit in perfectly here. They had asked, does generative AI effectively mandate and enable much larger scale multivariate testing of all elements of an ad campaign, even for smaller scale brands? I know data significance is a key in terms of learning models, right? Is that, how would you respond to that question?
So if you don't mind, I have an idea here. It's a mostly yes and a little bit of a no. Like, all of the research is suggesting that you're able to test more quickly, and you're able to waste fewer impressions, and you're able to have a deeper level of learning than you were able to in the past, and therefore achieve scale faster with less data. So one of the promises of this strategy is you can achieve faster growth with less data, but it does not annul the need or this idea of critical mass. Like, there's still this lower bound of data that you need to input into the model for it to work. So just because that bound is lower does not mean it has gone away.
And I would also add there that I think the training and the continuous development, continuous learning of the models is really key to that too. Because you could have the initial data that comes in, and maybe the model isn't working as well as you would thought, but then kind of training that, adding different metadata, things like that into that could potentially help. I think could also, even though maybe you only have maybe just a small amount over critical mass, but if you have enough other aspects with that, then maybe you're still going to be able to get the model to work if you train it more and kind of continuously learn there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with what everyone's been saying so far. And I think the other element that I would bring in is definitely hitting on the ability to enable more generative tasks. So even things like multivariate testing, going through and doing variations of creatives, that took quite a lot of effort, manual effort to understand, not even to mention the post stats analysis to go back in to see what was actually causing incremental gain on campaigns. So the fact that it's so easy to generate multiple forms of content in this new fashion, absolutely, we're going to see an uptick with the AI tooling in that space.
And I think something interesting too would be just kind of before you even do the testing, the ability to have personalized recommendations or sentiment analysis and see what people are more engaged in, and then use that to kind of drive what types of creatives you want to show before you even start testing. I think that stuff could be interesting as well, and try to help figure out what are going to be the things that you really want to actually put those multivariate test things into, like what do you want to invest into, by being able to see some of that up front and having AI kind of generate some of that.
Yeah.
So I think that, and this is going to Jeff, actually, it's a process question. I wanted to dive in a little bit to the creative part that Ethan talked about. Do you want to come back to that later, or do you mind if I make a comment now?
No, let's actually dive into that right now, in terms of as we look in the next 6 to 12 months. That was a question actually that came in from registration as well, as if we think about the nearest applications of generative AI and ad tech across the next 6 to 12 months, what might that look like? I know hyper personalization and creative is an area that you had mentioned. So please, let's jump on that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm coming from this world as CMO of WeatherBug, right? A place where you have very high brand standards. You have things published to all of your partners such that colors and ways that the brand and the logo are navigated are very important to it as it is a brand company. One of the things that always scared me and still does about generative AI when it comes to the creative applications within CTV is the brand bounds. Like the idea that creative in CTV is so hard to make right now, you have to have production companies and it's very expensive versus something be able to generate it for you, personalized based on that end user to optimize conversion rate. Like that's amazing. But like, what if that means taking the WeatherBug brand and, like stretching it across the thing or putting it with like bright red and yellow, things that, we don't do. And like, that's a WeatherBug. We're a smaller B2C brand. Like think about Coke, think about big ad spenders who are concerned about that. So that's always been my concern is I feel like one of the biggest opportunities, even money wise, is that generative AI of generating that creative, especially to that level of personalization. But like, is it possible to do that given the idea of brand guidelines within our ecosystem?
Yeah, can you train on brand guidelines, I guess, through an LLM or something like that, I would wonder.
True, and it's very strict, and it's very strict. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's a very strict set of bounds that you have to put in as to, but the idea is like, what's a variable and what's not? I don't know if the idea of it's going to test all sorts of things. I don't know, color's an easy example, but it to your point, at least it creates a need to be way more thoughtful in the deployment of that and having those strict bounds.
It's really interesting because it's an effect of not having a very quantitative success criteria where it's when you're talking about brand, the success criteria there, you can't count it, but you see it and you know it if it's a problem. AI won't be trained that way, at least initially. And so that becomes a really difficult aspect of trying to figure out what success is and to tell the AI which direction you want to go and what is a win and what is a miss.
And just go ahead. I was just going to say, just to give credence, someone in the chat did mention that it can be possible to include those brand guidelines into generative AI. So there are folks who may be a couple steps ahead on this kind of thing. I still have the same concerns, but you can build it in there, as someone has mentioned.
I think you can upload those and it'll be like, can you please follow these brand guidelines? And it'll be like, I'm sorry, Mike, I can't do that.
Does not convert.
It's against
your brand guidelines don't convert.
We have a better way for you. Yeah.
I think just before we move on to the topic, I think this is highlighting one of the biggest concerns with even application development within the space, which is deterministic outputs. So it's a whole new paradigm shift, especially from a technologist standpoint, on how can you build predictable outcomes from user prompts. And from a user experience standpoint, from a brand trust standpoint, from a generative content standpoint, that's something that is very, very difficult to solve when you're going back to the earlier conversation that we were having around the black box nature of these LLMs. So fine-tuning, reinforced learning is certainly techniques that can go about increasing your odds of predictability, but very hard problem to solve.
Yeah. And talking about creative and the notion of generative AI produced content, I think this is a question that came in. We have a number of questions. So I'm going to be trying to pick some of those off here. Thank you to the audience for submitting those. We aren't ignoring them. But should generated content be labeled or have some sort of disclaimer? That's an interesting question. I saw an article the other day that was kind of promoting that idea that yes, we should. What are the thoughts from the panel on that?
I think from my standpoint, the answer is absolutely, but it's very, very difficult. I think that what I'm more interested in is citation of the generated content. and figuring out how we got to that final answer, or the final output of the content that was created, what references were used, what pieces of material were used. Because again, this is all based off of the training inputs that are going into the platform. So one is just citation and really effectively being able to track the sources that went into content generation. And then second, I absolutely think that, some form of watermarking or labeling content for generated content is going to be really interesting for sure.
Yeah, that citation is a really important aspect of this, because before, when you're talking about a search engine, you're using the content to serve up a link to the content so that person that created the content can be paid in some way. This takes that almost entirely out of it. You get your question answered entirely absent of that content. And to your point, Ethan, without any awareness of what the content was in the first place.
Right.
So it seems like that aspect is really important, and it's going to be very difficult to solve that in a way that you can monetize and incent the people that created the content in the first place.
Yeah.
And I would also agree with, sorry, and I also agree with Ethan and Hamilton on that as well. And also just kind of a key thing I would think would be to also get stakeholder buy-in and make sure that everybody kind of is aware of what you're using and get that buy-in, and just have that ethical component, and make sure if there are issues or potential issues you see, having legal involved if you need to, just to make sure that you kind of cross all those I's and dot all those T's.
Yeah.
One thing I would add too is I think the media is important, as well as the idea of this quotation, right? There's a narrative of this story happened, and sometimes I find myself reading a top 10 list and I was like, damn it, this was AI generated, I know it. But then you have the idea of somebody said something, and when you have video, and you have a video of Nicolas Cage AI saying something, that's the difference between writing a story about here are the 10 things versus putting words in someone's mouth as a quotation in a story, or literally onto their face. The writing component, like, that tricks you, that part I'm just like, oh man, it sucks. But it's the other component that really concerns me, is like the idea of quotations and attributability.
Yeah. And this question from Maria that came in, I think, we Mike, you mentioned somebody in chat was commenting that they're aware of a company that can do just that, in terms of you upload brand guidelines as knowledge, if you will, and then it can train and build based on those specifications. So I think the answer is likely yes on this one.
And only just because it's a media buying related one, I'll jump in again. The first half of that, we talked a lot about brand guidelines as a bound, yes. The second component for successful campaigns, that's happening today. So those are the things we talked about. I didn't mention Google Performance Max, but they're another one where I've invested a ton, both publicly and in PR. So right now, you probably are, or you will be applying this generative AI in some sense, just to bring it up that, like, you may be doing a little bit already.
Yeah.
One of the interesting aspects of this is that historically, when you're going into an ad campaign, you have to know so much about your customers, and you have to use that to come up with very creative options. They have to be limited options, because you were constrained by cost or time to put out the right things, and how much time can you really put into measuring. But it switches here to a point where you don't have to know as much about your customers going into it, and you might actually learn something as an aspect. So the output is not just the successful execution of the marketing campaign, but also an input into the marketer of who is it that's actually responding. That seems like a paradigm shift in the way that you approach marketing and what you get out of it.
Yeah. Ethan, Hamilton, even Katie, I think this especially could go to you. Some registrants had asked, how is Kochava thinking about implementing generative AI into our stack of tools and platform? So I guess I'd start with you, Ethan, as CTO, right? Can you speak a bit to that?
Yeah, so I think to Katie's earlier point, we've been leveraging some form of AI for many years, whether or not it's in our fraud products or our predicted churn modeling tools. Where we've expanded it is really looking at the existing LLMs as enablement technology. One really good example of this is we just launched a service that is more or less a chat with your data type capability through our product called Kochava AI Prompts. That is taking natural language and turning it into SQL for non-SQL experts. And that's something that has plagued, certainly our client base for years. We pride ourselves on really measuring everything. That's a slogan that you will have heard from the Kochava stance, and that means we sit on vast amounts of data. You need data science teams to go through that, or at least working with our tools to understand the data that's coming in. Exposure to that data through AI tools and enabling marketers to get access to that rich data that we have on their behalf is crucial. So I think that's a common theme, just an overarching theme that I would express is we're really figuring out how we can use these AI tools to enable marketers to be more successful across their technology stacks.
Yeah, I actually think about a quick anecdote. When I was a client success manager working with our clients in the platform, I had a request that came in from a big consumer brand, apparel brand, and he had requested a data science project basically from his internal team, and he was given a timeline of 6 months is when they could turn that back around to him. And so we were able to do it at that time within basically a few days. But that required somebody on our team to write a very advanced, like complicated SQL script to run against our Kochava query tool to output that data. I guess so that's where I think now of the approachability that this has, if you think about the average marketer, right? Not a data scientist, right? And so maybe you can speak to this, Hamilton, as well, thinking about the AI suggestions that are already within the Search Ads Maven platform, but how does AI and the newest LLM advancements change the approachability factor to insights from your data?
Yeah, it's a pretty great way to start out with the most obvious opportunities that are afforded to you. Within Search Ads Maven, our initial foray into AI enablement was around identifying keywords that were plausibly likely to be productive in your campaigns. It's perfect for an LLM. It's just connecting language, and it might connect words that without its, it has less bias than you might have around the collection of words that you're aware of, have been exposed to, and think are related to your products and services. And it'll identify things that might be unique, surprising, and incredibly effective. And that's exactly what has happened. And that's a great start to where you begin. But I think that that element of I do something now and I want to have it automated or simplified is obvious first step, but it goes into a much broader impact that I think changes paradigms in a very short period of time with how things are developing. If you think about search marketing, really, you've got content creation, you've got creative, you've got to find the keywords, you've got to figure out what your strategy is that you're going to go to market with, your outcomes and your constraints, and then you have to actually execute that strategy. Every one of those things could be automated with AI. Whether it's an LLM or whether it's a narrow AI or what have you, it'll be a cobbling of a number of things. But all of that goes away, and it becomes just what do you want as an outcome? What is the effect of this advertising that you want? And what is your budget limitations and goals? Other than that, it's not your job. So you can really get back to doing what it is that your business is intended to do, and the marketing takes care of itself.
Yeah. Katie,
I would add on. Well, I don't want to interrupt, so I would add on to what Hamilton's saying as well. It's just, I think it allows for the opportunity to really look at all those front end inputs that are so important and really, put a lot of your time into that, and then let, all of the AI technology help figure out what that back end output is going to be, but spending all your time, on that front end and really figuring out that strategy, and then basically taking that strategy, putting it into the AI to help come out with that solution. And I think that's really, an interesting paradigm for marketers to be able to really spend more time on that, and then, have a more efficient, effective, quicker outcome that then they can use in their strategy and to keep that moving like real time.
Yeah. And I actually want to open another poll here as we jump into some additional Q&A, because we've got more questions, some of them in chat. Overwhelmingly for the first poll, we had 54 votes that were excited and 18 that were neutral, 6 scared. So for the most part, it seems like marketers are excited. But yeah, this poll is really trying to understand if you are using generative AI or AI tools in general for anything to date. what those functions are. So writing and content creation, creative, media buying, administration, other, or even if you're not using AI tools yet. So feel free to jump on that. One thing that came in here on the question and answer as well that I'm really curious for your thoughts on this, Mike, is how do you think generative AI apps impact paid search? Does this add use cases or is it cannibalistic? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think it's cannibalistic, but it's also a new media source. So one of the projects I was working on with a couple of our publisher partners on the Verve side is, okay, we're a publisher and our brand is going to pivot to this new future of digital, which could be generative AI. So our brand is like a bound for a discussion where you come and talk to us. And they're exploring, okay, there's ways to move people through the funnel and create owned and operated monetization. But what about advertising? How does this new model of connectivity that we were talking about earlier create opportunities for monetization for those companies where you're no longer going to the site? There's a spectrum. There's like really lazy, you can throw a 320 by 50 banner on it, or there's context and integrating this AI as you think about what to show an ad and when and how to talk about a brand. There's so many different dimensions that could be applied. So I think it will be cannibalistic of search, but I also think there is another way to monetize and connect at this channel touch points, and that's going to be ad product as applied to chat.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, right now it's hard to see it because everything that we're using in the broad spectrum is free. I go to chatbot and it doesn't cost me anything, and so it's really difficult. It's kind of obscuring that business model, and they're probably trying to figure it out. But the idea is that these service providers giving you the AI access, they're not doing it for free. They're going to want to make money, and it's going to be probably one of the two common ways. You either have a subscription or you're paying for it with ads. And if you generate a dialogue instead of a single search that takes you to the site that you then go finish your research, and it's just iteratively working through questions, every one of those is an opportunity for an ad. So it might actually increase the inventory for someone like Google that's now interacting with you, publishing ads through Bard.
Yeah, I would only say like the context becomes so paramount in that situation, because you see a bad ad and you're like, all right, I could ignore it. But if you're in a chat with somebody and they're like, while you're waiting, let me sell you these 3 things that have nothing to do with you, like that is much more of a jarring experience where you're more likely to lose users. So I think there's a barrier to entry, and this, this product in alpha can't be bad or you will bleed users. So I think there is a higher barrier to entry in creating something that works there, but tons of opportunity to make things work.
Yeah, this is great. And I'm just gonna start jumping into loading up questions from the audience here, because we got quite a few of them coming in now that we're about 16 minutes from the end here. So this is from Jake, and he's asking if LLMs are based on words. How do we personalize using all of the quant structured data marketers have? Ethan, Mike, Hamilton, Katie, open forum. Feel free to jump on any one of these.
Yeah, I can take a stab at it first. So the big thing here is even though they're called language models, they're not really based on words themselves. All of the models are trained on specific numbers, and the key that goes into it, it's a pretty really cool flow that has come out with the evolution of LLMs. But data goes through an encoder, gets vectorized, goes through an attention weighting process, bubbles up the top relevant words, association words, and can be then used for prediction on the final output. So the big difference post LLMs and really what's called a transformer architecture was needing to go in and catalog all of your data, tag it, label it, structure it. That was not something that was very easy to do, and that's why you had all of these data scientists and analysts going through and figuring out how to structure data to be able to leverage into a specific model. That's going away with the adoption of transformers in LLMs.
That's interesting. And I guess, I keep hearing that in a lot of the, I listen to the radio sometimes when I work and I hear ads for Gen AI tools, and they're always talking about, the importance of, you need enterprise generative AI solutions for enterprise data applications, right? And
Right.
the importance of the data going in being, if you will, clean or correct or accurate, because the data that goes in impacts what comes out the other side. But it sounds like that's expected to get better, right, over
Correct.
time. Okay.
Mhm.
It's interesting. Any other thoughts on this question from Jake, or do we want to move on to another question we've got here? Awesome. Okay, I'm going to jump to the next one so we can get through as many as possible. So this is from Maria. Do you think there is a possibility to integrate paid media in tools like ChatGPT when someone is asking a question to show companies that help with that question? So like best hotels in Spain. I think Maria might have run out of the max character length for the question submission. So I'm assuming that's competing with search is the question. So Mike, anybody, Ethan, want to take a stab at this one?
I think we talked about it a little bit before, but this is spot on. There's different layers of level of effort as you consider how this kind of product's going to be deployed. Like we said, there's some really easy, lazy ways to make money that maybe people will go after early on. But to your point, the context and qualification is better than search, maybe, because like you could potentially execute on the purchase in the chat. So I think that you worry about being hokey here and having it be spammy. Like, I think this just gets so spammy so fast. But if you do it right, and you can actually optimize for keeping your users and generating conversions, this is exactly where monetization is going to go for this media.
Yeah, you could. I'm thinking about the way that this becomes much more complicated than just finding a set of keywords that you want to advertise on and putting bid limits. You could actually have an advertising agent that is introduced within the chat with the primary chatbot. And if it's interesting or contextually relevant to the person that is doing research, they can engage then directly with your chat agent. That becomes an extended ad interaction that's all automated through your own AI, biased by your own data set that you put in and maybe experiences that agent has had in the past. So I think the answer is 100% yes. The people providing these services have to make money. And I think what we're going to find is going to be really interesting how that evolves.
And I think what I would just add on to this is to kind of brainstorm about gamification. Again, going back to some of the advancements in AI, it's largely around time to train these specific models. It doesn't take months worth of data. It doesn't take a year to generate the actual model. These are things that can be iterated on very quickly, which means new content is constantly getting added to the LLMs on what they're trying to predict. So anything based on reviews and ratings that go through these processes have the ability to potentially bias the output. And that's why it's going to be a whole new environment on gamification around things like paid search or content discovery. And I think that goes back to the earlier question that we had around labeling and citation of data. Where are the sources that go through? How was it determined that these are in fact the best hotels in Spain? And that's an evolving space that will be really interesting to watch over time.
Yeah. And another question here, and Mike, feel free to unmute. I muted the data through the controls just because of that background buzz. I think it's the computer fan. But this is
just a lot of computing going on over here. Sorry, Jeff.
You must have an LLM running on your computer or something. Let's see. So this one's from Michael, and it's: how would you recommend testing AI within the creative workflow process, knowing there's so much hesitancy to release creative control and artistic rights? It's a great question. Anybody want to fight on that one?
So one thing I'll mention, and I don't mean to be a plug for any specific company, but one of the companies that talks about this specifically in creative design is Moloco, if you're in the user acquisition space. So they have a tool where they will, based on your campaign or other predictions, create a set of 120 for you to approve. So it's not able to create it and deliver it in real time, but it does the computation to create it for you to then opt into. So I think there may be a few platforms that execute on that. I know, again, Moloco is one. That's an easy way to do it where you still have the final approval, but you have the benefit of having the performance baked in already by the partner.
Yeah, I love that call out, and per the comments in chat, integrate a human in the loop. I think that's spot on. One of the techniques to really go into, fine tuning models is reinforced learning, and that's a space that is going to be around for a long time, validating the outputs and understanding what is actually being generated by these services. So love the call out on manual approval, and it's a great way to start evolving with these technologies as we're adding them into our specific workflows.
And I would also call out just having, cross collaboration within teams in the org, so that if you think there is a concern about a right or maybe being a legal issue, things like that, if you have your legal team involved, if you have your creative team, you have your marketing team, if you just have kind of cross collaboration, then all those things can be thought about and talked about ahead of time, so that hopefully some of those are resolved before you actually start the testing.
Yeah. This question is not actually from me. I plugged it in because it came in during registration. So, but I think it's a great one, which is how AI is expected or might maybe we predict impact CPMs. Any thoughts on that from any one of you?
I do, but I've talked a lot, so I'll go last.
Yeah, I can.
Sorry, go ahead, Ethan.
Nope, go for it.
I think that it could be pretty interesting with impacting CPMs because if you have, like, I'll just take the predictive turn model I was talking about earlier. But if you have that and you get that information about potential quality, all of that ahead of time at day 7, you could then use that to optimize your media buying decisions. So then you're not maybe spending on a site that has a lot of impressions that isn't giving you those quality installs, and you're able to switch that around and switch your media plan earlier versus having to wait till later when you've already exhausted a lot of your dollars. So I think more of that real time and being able to do that more real time, and having more time to strategize ahead of time and then put that strategy into the AI model and have that help you come out with what the solution can be, I think can be really beneficial in impacting your CPMs and just making more efficient cost overall.
Yeah, and I think I would just add that we've hit on a few areas. I think this is something that is relevant for both publishers and advertisers to look at. One being a lot of the content generation going into your campaigns, being able to do more testing and optimization on the signals that are coming across. Again, ingesting all of the data that's coming through the ad signals as they're converting. To Katie's point, being able to leverage that in more of a real-time fashion to optimize campaigns, lower potential costs, but also on the publisher side, being able to optimize their audiences, understand the audience that they're working with, understand what creatives are getting the most traction, and then figuring out how to create as much yield as possible.
Yeah. Mike, I know you said you had some questions. Feel free to jump in now.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. Bottom line, it's good, right? We're talking about, especially in media buying, increasing the conversion rate, which generates more value per impression. So if you're a user acquisition manager, CPMs going up is not a bad thing. If you are a monetization manager, it's a very good thing. So we think about a lot of these downward pressures on the publishing community right now when it comes to addressability and other factors. This is a positive, right? This can increase some of the monetization that is being deteriorated. Here's one last call out I'll say though, is I'm still very nervous on AI applications of post-cookie, post-privacy. Like, we can use AI because it's not a device ID. Like, that still scares me. So not assuming it scales to infinite addressability, but at the end of the day, it's going to make campaigns convert more. Those campaigns will pay more, and the publishers will make more money. It's a good thing.
Yeah. I want to throw back up the poll results, and feel free, Hamilton, to jump in. I just wanted to throw this back up on screen. I'd left this poll open in the background for a while, and here's the output. So between writing and content creation, that's by far, and now some folks are jumping in, voting again. So any takeaways just from the output of this poll, or surprises, or is this kind of meeting your expectations, Mike, Ethan, Hamilton, Katie, with early adoption?
So apparently not a lot of Google buyers here. So anybody who's buying on Performance Max who is leveraging AI, whether they like it or not, but maybe there's just a whole bunch of people who are putting all the money on Pinterest and TikTok. So good for you all, although I feel like media buying may be a little higher in real life.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good call out. Yeah.
And,
I
think
go ahead.
not a ton of surprise. I think writing and content creation is a great way to get started. It's very easily understood. It has direct impact on everybody's day-to-day flow. And one thing that I would just say as an undertone to all of the conversations that we've been having is, a lot of this is language is the currency that's driving these initiatives forward, whether or not it's with your creatives, your media buying, writing your content. Hamilton said it earlier on. You ask what task you want to achieve, and AI is starting to generate content to derive the outcomes that you're asking for, powered by natural language. And that's something to really keep in mind as we explore different use cases and understand how we can apply it with specific workflows. Barrier to entry is very low. It's a really exciting space to get into, and it's for the first time, I think, a really approachable technology as an enablement tool.
Yeah.
Jeff, one curiosity.
Go ahead, Hamilton. I'm just bumping a question here on screen as well that we can cover as the last one here that came in from registration.
Yeah. So one question that I had on the poll there for the folks that are out in the audience, the 12 folks that voted for other, if you put in kind of what the other use case is in the chat, I'd love to see. I'm super curious. Yeah.
Well, maybe we can use AI to actually go and tap into their computer brains, and we'll find out what. So this is we're down to the last couple minutes, and so let's have maybe just one of you tackle this. This came in on registration, which I just plopped it in here. But what is the cost benefit analysis of implementing generative AI solutions in ad tech for small to medium sized businesses? So, one of you, who wants to bite on that one to wrap us up here?
I'll do a quick bite, and I'll just say that if you're working with a small team, leverage larger companies who have done the legwork on AI. Like, don't spend 70% of your day automating 10% of your month, just so you can talk about it. So long term, maybe you'll have something that helps you understand across your media buys how to optimize. But in reality, just testing on the backs of partners who are trying to productize it is, I think, the best way to stay close to it and not, burn a bunch of resources.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, we are 44 seconds from end time, and I just want to say thanks to Ethan, Mike, Hamilton, Katie. Very informative discussion. We had over 500 registrants for this topic. I think it's obviously top of mind for many. And so I appreciate the time today, and thank you to the audience for all the great questions. And if you want to get in touch with us and continue the discussion, since 60 minutes is just never enough time, go to kochava.com and fill out the contact us, and we're happy to continue chatting with you, consulting with you, telling you what we're doing with generative AI in our tool. So thanks everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, afternoon, wherever you may be. Awesome. Thanks all.
Bye, friends. Thank you.
Yep. See ya.